A new edition of 40k has just been announced. But what does it all mean? Is the universe going to explode? Are Space Marines now going to be exclusively available on square bases? Are Tyranids going to give birth to squat hybrids? What do you think? Is the Emperor finally going to stand up from the toilet and let somebody else have a go? These are all questions that normally we would have to wait a very long time to find out the answers to. However, this is a new GW we're talking about here, not the Games Workshop of old, like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory, where at best, if you have binoculars, maybe you'll just spy a glimpse of a single Oompa Loompa carrying the latest miniatures from building to building. Now, they're engaging with the community, and we've got an FAQ instantly. So all our fears are going to be eased, I feel. So let's immediately jump into the screen share and dig in, shall we? So here we go. The new edition of Warhammer 40,000, your questions answered. FAQ right on top of the giant Imperial Eagle. So let's analyze it piece by piece, shall we? And then wildly speculate. If you would like to comment as we're going along here, if you're watching this live, then I'll refer to those comments if anyone has any. If you've got any valuable insight or if you've got any humorous observations. I'm not going to hold my breath, though. So, to many of you, this will be an awesome surprise. Well, to some people, I'm sure it is. Others, an exciting confirmation of what you already suspected. Well, people have been suspecting that this edition has been on the horizon for a very long time, and people were gravely concerned that it's going to be turned into Age of Sigmar 40,000, or Age of Guilliman, or whatever you would call that. Here is an FAQ that answers a few of them. A few of them, not all of them, so I'm sure people are still going to be raging and very concerned after this. So, first thing, and most importantly, is my army still valid? Yes, it certainly is. Now, it doesn't say you won't have to rebase them on squares, but I think we can safely assume that's not going to happen. All your models, current armies, will be supported with the new rules. Can I still use all my models? Yes. Every Warhammer 40,000 miniature. So I did the right thing in not listing my Land Raider on eBay yesterday, which I was thinking about doing, but something was nagging at the back of my mind all day saying, no, don't do it yet, just hold off. And I didn't connect the dots that it was related to this impending announcement, but maybe I have some kind of psychic powers. Maybe I'm in tune with the Eye of Terror or something along those lines. So they'll all be supported with new rules, which will be available from the get-go in handy, low-cost books. So what that says to me is that they'll be similar to the Age of Sigmar books, where they just released a big, giant kind of compendium books for all the different overriding factions. So, for example, you'd have the forces of the Imperials or something, and it'd have all the different Space Marines and the Imperial Guard and whatnot, all in one book with just rules for all their units. Then you'd have another one for Chaos, another one for Orcs, and such. Or maybe just have a Xenos book with all the different alien races. Hello to all the people that have just popped into the chat there. So I think that's what we can glean from that nugget of info there. You're just going to have nice, big, very well-costed books. And normally when GW say something's going to be low cost, that normally means that you'll only have to put a second mortgage on your home rather than actually completely sell it. So on this occasion, though, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because the Age of Sigmar books were very moderately priced, the ones that allowed you to connect all your old models to the new rules. So I'm going to assume they are going to be low-costed. Even Forge World models? Yes, even all of your Warhammer 40,000 Forge World models. Now, it does have a couple of little asterisks there, and at the bottom, there's something along the lines of, if you've got Horus Heresy models, then you can still use them, but maybe not in the new rules or something like that. Wait, did you guys blow up the universe? That's the number one question people had. They thought it was heading towards the 40k end times. If the Emperor stands up, flushes the toilet, and it just all spirals into the Eye of Terror, and the universe is just gone, and suddenly Space Marines are all golden with wings and hitting each other with hammers. But no, that's not going to happen. Apparently, it's still the setting that you know and love. And a lot of people do know and love the 40k setting. It's maybe the most popular wargaming backstory and fluff of any game system. That's pretty much what sells it. That's not to say we won't see the story advance. So whether that means just a few characters die in the story, or whether entire races will be squatted, as it were, or whether entirely new races will pop up, you would imagine you'll have some kind of combination of the above, because they have been bringing back old stuff in recent years, haven't they? With the Mechanicus were only kind of mentioned, as far as I know, they didn't have models for them. And they've brought back some of the old Primarchs and Eldar things that were long gone. So maybe we'll see a couple of races disappear forever. Maybe there are a few that aren't selling very well. Maybe the squat will come back. That'd be one thing that could get me to buy a new army, if they're going to bring back the squat, although I have just spent an untold amount of money on Caradron Overlords for Age of Sigmar. So whether I could justify the purchase of 2 technologically advanced dwarven races in such a short time remains to be seen. You can expect the story arcs that began in the recent Gathering Storm campaign books to continue to unfold, with plenty of exciting developments to look forward to. Not much info there. Needless to say, the story is continuing. Dino Titan Edition in the chat says, I actually don't think 40k is dark enough. As long as the room isn't pitch black, it's too bright and cheerful. Well, in the far future, it is supposed to be just nothing but war because it's so grim. You'd expect more darkness, perhaps. But you still do have kind of fun stuff in there as well, don't you? Like the orcs, comedy races. How can I get the rules? Well, this is the interesting part. I'm going to make it easier than ever to get your hands on the rules and start playing. The core rules for the game will be free. Now, for anyone who's not played Age of Sigmar, you may not be familiar with this word free. It's where you acquire a good or a service without parting with any currency in exchange for it. That's the gist of how free works. And it's something that GW have been exploring over the last year or two. And it seems they've got a taste for it now. So the core rules will be free and available, no doubt, on a brand new 40k app. Whether there'll be 4 pages of rules like Age of Sigmar, or whether it'll be much more expanded than that, we shall see. Because have you dumbed down 40k? Well, that would be the obvious conclusion there. If the rules are going to be free, are they only going to be 4 pages long? Not at all. We've made it easier for new people to enter. That sounds a bit like dumbing down to me. And get to grips with the basics. At the same time, we've made sure you can add as much depth and complexity as you like. New gameplay elements, but they've re-examined every aspect of the game and made improvements. Improvements. That's a bit of a relative term, isn't it? Many based on the gaming community's feedback and suggestions. If you play today, this game is recognizably still Warhammer 40,000. Okay, so does that mean you still have weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, and all that stuff that Age of Sigmar did away with? The way it's described here, you would think that the core of the rules is going to stay the same based on that. Otherwise, this whole paragraph would be kind of misleading. If it's still recognizably the same game, but it's been drastically changed and improved and streamlined, then it's no longer recognizably still the same game. Because what I recognize as 40k is a bunch of people standing around the table consulting 18 different rule books for their army, finding out that they have an army-wide special rule that they didn't know about before, but each aspect of that special rule is contained within a separate tome that they have to go through 100 different pages to find, and then that part of the special rule then gives them 2 other special rules which are found in a different book. And it's basically, turn 1 is just a huge treasure hunt, and then if you can remember all that for turn 2, then the game will go by smoothly. And if a different rule comes up that you have to go on a treasure hunt for, then you repeat the process. So it's not going to be recognizably for Warhammer 40,000 if you don't have to dive through 1,000 books anymore, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not buying this paragraph at all. I think you've either dumbed it down or streamlined it, or you've kept it exactly the same. I don't think you can do both. It's going to be interesting, though. If they've just pulled in a few aspects of Age of Sigmar that they liked and were popular, and they had maybe had some focus groups and asked some of the competitive 40k players, perhaps, maybe they consulted with some tournament players and took nuggets of info from what they had to say, and thought, yeah, we can drag that particular rule over from Age of Sigmar, that works, but we're going to keep the core of it the same. So the main player base won't feel like we've totally abandoned the rule set, but really we kind of have. We've just kept in a few. We've kept in strength and toughness just so it still feels like the same rule set, but really we've changed everything else surrounding it. So only wild speculation, really, that we can make based on this. It doesn't give us enough information, and some of it seems quite contradictory. If anyone has any thoughts on that, let me know in the chat. Let's see. Anything interesting popped up in there yet? Raphael Perry says, I can't wait for 40k players to react to getting the Age of Sigmar treatment. Well, it's funny you should say that. I can probably spoil this for you guys because you're not going to fall for it anyway. I'm thinking of doing a fake Rage video where I pretend to put all my Space Marine models into a box and then set fire to the box. After, of course, the models have been removed from it. But you never know, that could go viral. People setting fire to things, that's usually the way to get views in this day and age. Let's see. So continue your wild speculation in the chat if you don't mind. What happens to my codexes? Well, this whole paragraph could be summed up with that's what happens to your codexes. None of them are valid anymore. Oh, but if you're really into all the great hobby content, which is freely available online, and background information, which, well, some people might be really interested in that, that'd still be valid. They're not rewriting history or anything, not telling you to paint your miniatures differently. But all the rules, which is the main reason people buy codexes, as far as I'm concerned, all of those are now going to be invalid, unless you wish to continue playing the old editions, which could well happen if they make enough changes so there's like a huge divide in the community. Then all the tournament cheesemongers will be on one side of the divide, and they'll probably stick with the previous edition, or they'll make their own. Like in Fantasy, you've got the 9th Age crowd. Maybe someone will do a project similar to that with 40k, and then all the new players will move to this shiny, wonderful new green, pleasant land where everyone's more friendly because all the tournament mongers have been left behind. Although, we'll get to that in a moment. What's in the new starter box? They're not telling us. So they're asking the question, but not providing an answer. We can safely assume it's going to have Space Marines in it, though, can't we? Has there ever been a starter box without Space Marines? I would hazard a guess that there has not. Let's think back. Well, there was the Space Marines and Orcs. There was Space Marines and Dark Eldar. There was Space Marines and Orcs again. Space Marines and Chaos. Space Marines and Tyranids. Any others that I'm missing there? Benjamin Powell says the 8th millennium. That would be kind of a trip into the past as far as they're concerned, though. John Brendan Markham says burn Space Marines. Dino Titan Edition. I think it's time for a little witch hunt. Let's call them haters and fanboys. Now, let's be nice. Let's give people the chance to react to news the way that people do in this society. Calmly, in a considered manner, obtaining all the information they can on a topic before making an informed decision and forming their opinion that way. I think we can trust the world to do that based on recent events. Let's keep going. Are you getting rid of points? Not at all. Of course, people were going to ask that because that was one of the main things that drove away all the tournament cheesemongers from Age of Sigmar, or from Warhammer Fantasy, should I say, because Age of Sigmar didn't have points in it. So people were going to be speculating on this, obviously, whether points would disappear from 40k. But they haven't. However, they are bringing in the 3 ways to play, which really means you can be what you were before, if you were a tournament monger, or you just like to be able to have even, it's funny using that word, or balanced, even funnier using that word with 40k. But as far balanced as you could be with points values and such, you could play that way. You could play the kind of hippie way, which is turn up with whatever miniatures you just like the look of that day, and throw them down on the table and hope that your opponent didn't bring 18 Imperial Knights. And there's the narrative way, where you can build a force that is based on some of the fluff and maybe take part in iconic battles of the 41st millennium, or create your own campaigns and sagas. So really, narrative play is kind of a hybrid of the two, because you're going to have some restrictions, because you're going to have to keep your army themed, But at the same time, you're going to have the slight competitive nature of continuing a campaign. So if you win, it'll go down this particular branch. So you've got a little bit of the competitiveness in there, but then there probably won't be hard points limits on it. So that falls somewhere in the middle if you're a bit of a storyteller. So whichever way you like to play, it looks like you're going to be catered to here. Anything else popping up in the chat? Yes, it does seem like this is the way GW are going to do it from now on. Will the rules be updated annually, a la the General's Handbook? What a great idea. So yes, they will, which I think is a very good move, because in theory, that could remove what some people refer to as the Codex power creep, where whenever a new book would come out, that would be the ultimate power. It would absolutely crush everything to death, and there would be no point taking any other army. You should just take the new stuff because it's better than everything else, unless it's Dark Angels, in which case it's still terrible. But with the General's Handbook, then that would suggest that they'll release new scenarios and perhaps new point values for all the units all across the board every year, and just rebalance everything and make tweaks. So if they bring out a book that's obscenely powerful and someone goes out and buys 100 land speeders because they're the new cheese, then in the next General's Handbook, suddenly they double in points. Then it does give you a bit of confidence to buy the miniatures that you like rather than whatever is currently obscenely overpowered in the game, because you know you're only going to have to wait a year until there are some balance tweaks made. Whereas before you could be waiting multiple years for a codex for points to be changed on a particular unit. Unless you're Space Marines, in which case you get one every 3 weeks with a new tactical squad box that's exactly the same but maybe has a new weapon in it. Let's see. So that's a good move. I haven't played 40k in a while. Welcome back. The new Warhammer 40,000 is easier to learn and quicker to play, but still has all the tactical, strategic, and narrative depth you could want from a game set in the incredibly rich setting of the 41st millennium. It's going to be easier than ever to get started and more fun than ever to master. Is that true? Well, I have played 40k recently, but I don't play it very often. I would say I play 40k maybe 3 times a year. So I'm definitely not what you'd call a hardcore player. I know pretty much all the basic rules. There are a few things where I'll look at the rule and think, rend. What does rending do again? Is that where you re-roll 1s to wound, or if you get 6, then there's no armor save? And I'll have to occasionally look up to make sure I've got it right, because sometimes the terminology changed between editions and I don't play it enough to necessarily keep up. But I get the gist of all the rules. It's army special rules I have no idea with, because there are so many of them spread across so many different books. Even just having like the Tau Codex probably doesn't tell you everything you need to know to fight against Tau. There are probably multiple other books that you would need to look at to get all the info on each army. So it's very, very annoying. If it's going to be easier to learn and get into, then that's going to be a good thing. Don't have much more to say on that particular bit. People who haven't played 40k for a while, would they come back in because of this? I don't know. It definitely brought lots of people back to fantasy when they turned it into Age of Sigmar. It took a lot of people out and brought a lot more people in by the sounds of it. The community in Age of Sigmar is doing very well, but obviously 40k hasn't been like the bleeding money the way fantasy presumably was. So it's going to be a bigger risk doing anything to this system. So maybe it'll be more gradual steps. Just wean people onto the way they want to play slowly over the next few editions, rather than just completely sweeping it all away and starting again like Age of Sigmar. Let's see, Raphael Perry, I would come back if they destroyed all the Space Marines and stopped pushing them on people all the time. Yes, they do like to shove Space Marines down people's throats, don't they? But you could say they're justified in doing that because they sell. If they're shoving it down your throat and you just willingly swallow all the Space Marines that they're shoving in there, then really you've only got yourself to blame. They won't change until you start spitting them out. Let's see. Dino Titan Edition. They didn't destroy it. It was destroyed already. They rebuilt it better than before. If you're referring to Age of Sigmar, then yes, it had been kind of destroyed. Fantasy, anyway. 40k, some would argue that the game has been destroyed because the state of the game is a horrible, bloated mess, in the opinion of many. I'm sure some think it's absolutely perfect. Anyone who manages to keep on top of 100% of what's going on in 40k and reads all the books and spends untold sums, and maybe they have an entire wing of their house dedicated to housing all the codices and the Forge World supplements that you need nowadays. Maybe someone like that has no issues with the way the game currently works. But I would hope that people would enjoy the game being streamlined a bit more. It should bring new players in, you would think, if it's more simple. And if there are options to play less restricted. Well, they already kind of had that with playing an unbound army, didn't they? But there were some negatives attached to that as well, if I recall. Why should I trust you? Come on, this is New Games Workshop. Tee-hee-hee. Well, they're throwing in a lot of humour into their posts on social media and on their website now, so that's nice. But yeah, we really have no idea other than just basing it on what they've done before with Age of Sigmar. So we know they're willing to try new things. Are they willing to try new things on the cash cow / golden goose of the company, though? Homeezy20 says, I'd come back if it was slimmed like Sigmar. Not all positives, but faster, easier to pick up and go. Yeah, I wouldn't say I agreed with 100% of the Age of Sigmar rules. I'm sure if I was writing them, I would have made a couple of amendments. But on the whole, it was a very positive change from 8th edition fantasy, I think. And as long as it's still recognizable as 40k because it has a huge player base they don't want to anger, because I don't think the ozone layer, as recovered as the ozone layer presumably is, I don't think it could handle the amount of plastic space marine armies that would be burnt in rage if 40k was to completely become Age of Gulliman. So I think they're doing the right thing in not completely wiping out the old game. So they're trying to keep everyone else on side, but also simplifying it enough so that it's not so off-putting anymore. Making the rules free is a very good step as well, because I don't think I've even had the rule book for the last edition or two of 40k. The last rule book I had was the Dark Vengeance, when that came out with the Dark Angels, and that's what got me back into 40k a little bit, because I was an old-time Dark Angels player. And that was in, what, 2012-ish? Maybe Christmas 2012, around about that time. Dark Vengeance. And I don't think I bought a more recent rulebook than that. I just relied on other people bringing their rulebook with them because I was never sure when the next edition was coming. So there may have been a couple of rulebooks since then. I don't know, but they've all been pretty much the same. Seem to have been very few differences over the course of those 2 or 3 rule sets. So this is going to be quite a departure, though. And also it's going to allow people to review the rules for free without having to actually spend £60 on a giant rule book. So that's obviously good. You can decide whether you like the look of it and whether you want to try it without actually having to hand over a huge wad of cash. Dino Titan Edition, I think the fluff is going to become a little less dark. To be honest, this super dark setting in fantasy and 40k is very old school, and nowadays people like their faction to at least have a solid He's not quite finished his word there. I think he's gone over the text limit. So we'll get back to that post in a minute. Mickey Jennifer, there would have been more horn juice in your rules. Yes, there would have been more unicorns and their horn juice. Okay, he's finished his sentence now. At least have a solid ground. Until now, everything was like overkill win of the baddies. The way the 40k universe is set up, it seemed like the evil forces were allegedly doing well. And maybe mankind was on the brink of destruction, but really, did you ever get the impression Space Marines were ever going to lose anything? I'm not the biggest expert on the 40k fluff, but when they have like entire audio dramas where one Space Marine wipes out an entire planet of orcs, then that says to me the Space Marines in the end are going to win. They are the Golden Boys. And if you include the Sisters of Battle, the Golden Girls as well. Though I don't know if they're technically Space Marines, because there was some kind of nonsense about, oh, Space Marines can't be women because it's in the genes or something. So maybe they'll have female Space Marines other than Sisters of Battle. That would be interesting. I'm sure that would cause people to set their armies on fire, because there are a lot of people that take that kind of thing very, very seriously. And if someone rewrites a bit of the backstory that would cause untold rage in the community. Let's see. Seriously, though, everything we're talking about is just an extension of the community engagement work we've been doing over the last year and a half. Blah, 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 blah. Drop us a line on Warhammer 40,000 Facebook page if you think we've missed something. Well, I think there are probably a few things they've missed. What do you think they've missed, people? Let me know in the chats if you think they've missed something big that you wanted to ask them about that they haven't mentioned in this first FAQ. Drop that in the chat immediately. Let's see. Dino Titan Edition. The only thing, Space Marines always kind of win. Yes, they do. I remember there was the big fantasy campaign back in the 90s, and there was also a big 40k one as well. The Armageddon one, I think it was. And with both of those campaigns, you felt like, hey, the story's going to move on now. Interesting things are going to happen. And then it was just a case of not really the goodies won. The end, as far as I recall. They didn't answer any questions about the return of the squats. That's true, Raphael Perry. So they should clarify whether squats are going to be returning. Mickey Jennifer says, will there be scuttlings in 40k? I would imagine not. Stu Gibson, wouldn't be surprised if they kill off the Emperor. Time for Space Marines to move on. Can they really kill off the Emperor, though? I mean, he can stand up from his kind of soul toilet that he's been on for all these centuries. But would that... I've heard people say that he will die if he stands up. And I'm sure people out there have been sitting on the toilet long enough to know that occasionally, if you've been sat there long enough, it does feel like you're going to die when you have to stand up. And if you imagine sitting there for like 1,000 years or however long the Emperor has been there, just consuming people's souls or their essence. I imagine the Emperor's diet is kind of like when they drain the souls of the creatures in the Dark Crystal and they just send out these empty husks to provide the Emperor his nourishment. So if the Emperor dies, what does that actually change? Other than everyone saying, for the Emperor! Would they have to come up with a new catchphrase? Is that the only thing that would change? Is the Emperor sitting on the throne the only thing that's like sealing up the Eye of Terror? You can probably tell I have a very basic grounding in all the 40k fluff because I've heard people talk about it at great length. I just haven't personally read that much of it myself. So I have an overall understanding of it, but the specifics are probably way off. I know the Tyranids ate the squat, so you would think they've worked their way through the Tyranid digestive system by now, and they'd be ready to maybe excrete a couple of squat exo armor suits. So you would think that race could come back after passing through the Tyranid digestive system. Let's see, Homeasy20, Emperor keeps Astronomicon going. Okay then. Well, you'll have to let me know what the ramifications of that would be if that's stopped going. Mickey Jennifer says he eats a lot of meat, that is why he has to sit on the toilet a lot. That would certainly explain it. Let's see. So let's finish off on this page, shall we? So where can I find out more? They'll be running daily articles. So they're going to give new information every day. That's going to be quite something to keep up with. Every aspect of the new edition, new miniatures, advancements in the setting, new rules. Interesting. So there could be one of these ridiculous live broadcasts every single day, really, except I would never do that. I'm sure there are going to be people out there doing it, covering every single nugget as soon as it drops out of the Emperor. I love it. I want it. When can I have it? Really soon. You'll be playing it this year. Well, that's not really soon, is it? It could come out on New Year's Eve. I wouldn't class that as really soon. I would say really soon, like a month. So I think it's going to be a bit longer than that because we don't have any more info yet. Maybe autumn time. We'll let you know when we have more news on exact release date. Stay posted. So really, they're not giving you too much info on that because they want you to remain glued. What do I do now? It's time to start getting your army ready. More ways to build your collection than ever before, so you can build whatever you want and you'll be able to use it somehow within the rules. The edition's not even out yet and you guys have an FAQ, how times have changed. Well, it's not changed that much because I remember when the Dark Angels Codex came out and there was an FAQ and errata on the day it came out because there were so many mistakes in it. So really, they're just going back even more now to way before the edition's even out, they have one coming out. So it's not that we have to wait for them too long, usually. It's that, if anything, they don't check their own products enough before releasing it. So hopefully nothing like that will ever happen again, because that was a bit of a nightmare. Okay, here's what they were saying about the Forge World stuff. Well, for the moment, it won't affect the Forge World Horus Heresy rules. You can carry on using the existing 140,000 rule set for your Horus Heresy games. So really they're saying, we're still supporting you by not supporting you at all. You can still use your Horus Heresy miniatures, but you have to use them in this game that's now obsolete. That's what I'm taking from that. So I would feel misled if I was a Horus Heresy fan there. They're acting like they're supporting you, but really they're kind of throwing you out into the wilderness and banishing you to the ancient, antiquated rule set that nobody's going to use anymore. And then they've got a lovely picture of half a Space Marine's head, half an evil Space Marine's head, and some bolters. And is that what happens when you turn to Chaos? Your little skull symbol loses all its feathers and just gains a giant evil eye in the middle of its forehead instead. Makes sense to me. Here's the FAQ in a few other languages. Oh, well, I suppose we don't really need to go into that. I'm not even going to speculate on what those two languages are, because I can't read whatever particular characters those are. Should we not? No. That's just silly. Okay, I'm going to have a final look at the comments in a moment, and then I'm going to wrap this one up, because as I said, at the moment, it's all just wild speculation, and we don't know exactly what's being done to anything yet. They've given us a few hints, but that's really just to keep you tuning in and to stop you burning your army, because if they just said new edition is coming, the timeline's moving on, and it's going to be more like Age of Sigmar, then people would set fire to their armies. There would be land raiders flying out of windows now, as we speak. So I'm not surprised that they've wanted to clarify a few things just to calm people's nerves a bit and hopefully put any fears to rest. But I'm sure there are still a few. If you have any fears after hearing all this, then put them in the comments. Especially if you're not watching this live, put them in the old permanent comments. And then maybe I can refer to some of them next time we cover something like this. Let's have a look. Homeasy20 for guidance in the warp. So you can pass through the warp as long as the Emperor is sitting on the toilet. Makes perfect sense to me. So, Dino Town Edition. I can imagine the Imperium of Mankind teaming up with Tau and the Eldar more often, essentially forging a grand faction of good guys. That would kind of make sense if you have good versus the forces that want to corrupt and destroy the universe. Although, don't certain Space Marines think that all the aliens are just evil scum that should be purged from orbit? So I don't know how alliances would work there. Although people have complained in the past that Blood Angels had tea parties with Necrons. So there is precedent in the fluff for that kind of thing. Let's see. I wonder if anyone is offended enough to go out and buy a 40k army just to set fire to it. Someone probably is. Someone with a lot of money to literally burn, who really wants to make a statement and wants to get 500,000 hits on a video, but not gain any subscribers out of it. Then yes, that would be the way to go. Homeasy20 have Order, Chaos, Destruction, Nom Nom, aka Tyranids. Who else would be in the Nom Nom Grand Alliance? Ramvi, wow, live show. Yes, this is a live show. Much earlier than usual, so I'm sure there are some people in the audience that haven't seen on one of these live shows before. And this one is about to wrap up, though. It was only going to be a short one. I just wanted to whiz through this and give my thoughts and wild speculation on this as it hit. And I'm sure it's going to act as excellent channel clickbait as well. There's going to be untold people typing into the YouTube search bar 40k new edition. Maybe my video will be on the front page for a few days. And it'll get untold people subscribing to this channel and then immediately unsubscribing when they see that I've got like 5 Kings of War videos in a row lined up. So it'll get me some nice views, though, which is always good, and maybe 1 or 2 of them will stick around for my charming personality and endless fountain of charisma and wit. I bet not hear any disagreement on that point from the chat. Okay, wrapping this one up, folks. Any final comments? Panis111, I might start 40k now. Well, I might actually hold on to my Dark Angels because I've been toying with the idea of shoving them on eBay for a long time now. But I'm going to see exactly what the new rule set is like and probably give it a go. I've already got an army. The rules are going to be free. And if I want the rules for my Space Marines, I'm probably just going to have to buy a book that costs somewhere in the region of £15. So I'd be quite happy to do that. And maybe it'd even have Imperial Guard in there as well. And then Halfling Pete or / Praetorian Pete would be able to use his army with that book as well. So that'd be interesting. Speaking of him, actually, he's supposed to be coming round in a couple of weeks for some kind of game, unless he cancels again. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play any 40k with him because I don't know any of the Imperial Guard rules at the moment. So maybe he'll have to wait for the next edition to get his Praetorians on the table. But anyway, time to go, folks. So let's drop the old screen share, shall we? And any last second comments before I close this one down? If not, then I'm sure I'll see many of you on Tuesday for the Andy and Rem show, which may be minus Rem this week. And what else am I working on video-wise? Let's see, I've got a video on basing or rebasing and retraying my Kings of War armies. I've got a tutorial on how not to spill your GW Citadel shades / washes as well, which should be coming out at some point if I ever get around to doing the voiceover on that. So very, 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 very exciting. Oh, South Dakota Bob has just jumped in the show just in time for it to close down, so you're going to have to watch it delayed without it being live. So your comments will never be heard, apart from later on when I go through and read them all. Let's see, Mickey Jennifer, will there be Khorne-related special guests? Yes, on the Andy and Rem show on Tuesday, there will be the Khorne legend, Mr. Stu Gibson, who is the resident Khorne expert and friend of the show, who will be assisting with all the latest Khorne knowledge. And of course, I'll be talking about the Caradhran Overlords, which I'm assembling at the moment. Look at this bad boy, the Arcanaut Admiral. He's almost finished assembly. And then I've got lots of others in boxes behind me to move on to next. So I think it's time to say goodbye, everybody. And I will catch you next time. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, the Facebook group and so on. And goodbye.